is a little bit blinding up here. We've had so much to absorb today, such a lot of information, such a lot of challenging ideas, and I think my job is to bring us back to the human, back to those parts of us that sometimes don't feel very competent. Those parts of us that sometimes are in full celebration and other moments are lonely. Sometimes we feel super able and sometimes we feel useless. So just let's go down there for a moment to what it's like to be human. So I'm going to start with somebody who taught me a lot, Nelson Mandela. I first met him when we had, I think it was the second meeting of the elders. And it was a room full of about 40 or 50 people. And he was 89 then, and he walked in on Peter Gabriel's arm, and he sat down and he started speaking. And he's not an orator. He's got a raspy voice, and he doesn't use oratorical flourishes. And when he started speaking, I got goosebumps. Does everybody know what goosebumps are? 35 minutes later, when he finished speaking, I still had goosebumps. And I asked myself, what is going on? It's never happened before. And it took me a long time to work out what it was. And what it was I was getting the energy of this man's integrity, viscerally. So that's what the maturity of a human spirit can do at distance. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, about how the real peace builders achieve what they achieve. What Mandela did was he used 27 years in prison on Robben Island to hone that integrity, and with his colleagues to convince them to negotiate with one of the most violent governments the world has known. I lived there for 10 years and I know. And what he managed to do was to not only avoid a civil war in South Africa, which we all thought was coming, but to enable negotiations, the building of an election, and then a new democratically elected government. Now, this was all through the depth of his self-knowledge and self-awareness that he had honed in prison. And this is exactly the leadership we're looking for now. The leadership we need to have to avoid leaving to our children a dysfunctional, environmentally chaotic universe. The writing's on the wall. I don't need to spell it out to you. Multiple crises are arising, and attempts to deal with them are failing. Einstein said, no problem can be resolved from the consciousness that created it. So where we are now is needing not just a little shift in consciousness, but a massive leap in consciousness. The biggest leap probably that humanity has ever made. And that's what Otto Scharmer was really talking about. So true pioneers, and my mentor was Professor Sir Joseph Rotblat, the only nuclear physicist who resigned from the Manhattan Project. And he said to me, the future belongs to those who can see it. And this makes me realize that vision, being able to see the future as it could be, is absolutely vital to the changes we need now. It's the vision to dare to do things that have never been done before, ever. That's why Odyssey is important, what we're doing here. I hadn't even heard of Odyssey 2 months ago. And now when I see what's possible, and I see a lot more of it today, I realize that this combination of tech, of communication, and of brilliant young minds is exactly what's needed now. So today's pioneers are sufficiently in touch with the planet, in touch with technology, and in touch, in most cases, with their inner voice to know what needs to be done and how to do it. And it begins with the radical mastery of one's inner being. Brilliance, articulation, charisma, and so forth are all great gifts of a leader, but you can't gain the effectiveness and the coherence that we need now only if you have sustained inner power. So what am I talking about? In half a century of doing this work, the most important lessons I learned from people like Desmond Tutu and Mary Robinson was that inner work is the prerequisite for outer effectiveness. The quality of our awareness directly affects the quality of the results that we can deliver. Let me give you an example. I work with local peace builders all over the world, and one of them is a woman in northwestern Pakistan called Gululai Ismail. When she was 15, she started getting girls into school, in itself very dangerous. Her colleague Malala Yousafzai was shot in the head for doing just that. Gululai, undeterred, she is fearless, now is organizing teams of young people to go into the madrasas, that's the religious schools, identify the jihadis, go home with them to talk with their families about why the Quran would not approve of suicide bombing, and they have so far dissuaded over 200 suicide bombers from carrying out their mission. If that's not conflict prevention, I don't know what is. And to do that kind of work, we have to know our own shadow. This is how we get inner power. This is a shift in consciousness so that we can develop this diamond honed by daily self-reflection. We ask all our peace builders to adopt some kind of practice that they do every day to look inside. A bit like what one of my colleagues calls the balcony view, being able to hover above your own head and say, what am I up to? What am I doing? That is self-knowledge and inner power. And if we can master that ability, then we're able to be present in the moment when it's needed. I was telling my colleagues at lunchtime today about a young lieutenant colonel. I'll tell you the same story quickly. This young lieutenant colonel was called Chris Hughes, and he was leading a foot patrol down a street in Najaf in Iraq, when you still could lead a foot patrol. This was 3 months after the American invasion. And all of a sudden, out of the streets and houses on both sides of the road came furiously angry people screaming and yelling and waving their fists. And these young soldiers, young American soldiers, didn't speak Arabic. They had no idea what was going on. Chris Hughes, in a flash, knew what to do. This is presence. He walked into the middle of the throng with his rifle pointed down at the ground and gave his men an order they had never heard in their lives before. Kneel! And they wobbled to the ground with their heavy backpacks and their body armor and put their weapons into the sand. And the whole crowd grew silent. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, everybody went home. Now that presence of mind and heart of that young man prevented a massacre, prevented a bloodbath. So that's what we're talking about when we mean inner power is necessary. And it's known in all the great spiritual traditions, but it must be reclaimed by our secular world in crisis. I'm certain that a different future for humanity is possible if we humans wake up. That means a lot more than sitting nicely in meditation every day. It's a radical revision of our values, and young change makers are at the cutting edge of this. Besides all the technical skills we need, and they need, to do the research they need, to build their teams, to raise funds, they need skills to build trust in their teams, to resolve conflict in their teams, and what the Quakers call speak truth to power. But work like this is below the radar. It doesn't make the headlines. It's at ground level. What I'm excited about is what I'm picking up that's coming from the bottom up, like green shoots through concrete. When we first did the research to set up Peace Direct in 1999, we were able to identify 350 viable, reliable, locally led peace initiatives in areas of hot conflict. Now there are 5 times that many in under 20 years. So this phenomenon is growing all by itself. These are people who, women and men, and sometimes very young people, are risking their lives so other people don't get killed. This is what's possible at the bottom now. Our leaders are in chaos. They're stuck in the 20th century of values, maybe even before. But these people that are coming up all over the world, this is not just in the wealthy West. This is all over the world. So this is a movement without a name. These are people who are awake to the earth, who refuse to resign themselves to endless consumption, to me, me, me. They've got the courage to enter the darkness of what humans do to humans, to look at it straight in the eye and to stand up to put a stop to it, to create something alive and dynamic in its place. I've been so energized by this that after 50 years of doing this kind of thing, I wrote a book called The Business Plan for Peace. People write business plans for everything, but nobody, as far as I know, has written a business plan for peace. Why not? So I got curious about what it would cost to scale up 25 initiatives that I know and all my colleagues know work to stop war, and cost them out over a 10-year period. And the total, you won't believe this, comes to $2 billion. That's all. When we spend $1,739 billion every year on militarization of the world, and $31 billion alone would end starvation in the world. We are crazy. So, the connections that are happening as a result of this awakening are between those who are in NGOs, are working with governments, they are working in collaboration, but they've all moved from me to we. Very much what Otto Schumann was just saying. They care less about how much they have and more about how much they can offer. That's why I see that this hackathon happening in April is essential to enable us to make connections and share these values. And the Business Plan for Peace, that's the organization that we've now set up as a result, is very proud to be working with Odyssey to build a new challenge on conflict prevention. So, I was asked, in conclusion, I'll say, I was asked to talk to a gathering of 2,000 young social entrepreneurs in London last week. And they asked me for my 5 top tips. Now, I'm rather allergic to top tips, but I did it anyway. And I'll just hand them on to you because they got very excited. First of all, is reconnect with nature yourself. Discard your device, take off your shoes, go outside from your office, stand on the grass, and breathe. Connect yourself with the earth. We talk about needing to save nature. Actually, we need to get our strength from nature. And it doesn't matter how much we've hurt her, how much we've bullied her, but like the good mother she is, she's still there for us. So use her. Don't get lost. This is the second one. You've got a mission now. We've all got a mission now, and we need our own inner guidance. So each day, to tune into our own GPS. Stay clear. Find our soul path. Because that's where the passion is. When young people come to me and say, I'm desperate, the world's in such a mess, I don't know what to do, I'm practically suicidal, I ask them 3 questions. What breaks your heart? Because what breaks our heart is where the passion is. That's where the energy is. That's where the daring is and the courage. Second question, what skills have you got? Are you good at social media? Can you raise money? Have you got friends who'll gather with you? Find out what your skills are and apply your skills to your passion, and you're off. I guarantee that in 5 or 6 weeks, you'll have a group around you, and you will be working on the thing you most care about. Thirdly, and there's another key there. Pour your passion into what you're doing. Make love your currency. Then, when things look dark, when your inner critic gets at you, is there anybody in this room who does not have an inner critic? Who's not subject to the imposter syndrome that you're going to be found out one day? All of us have an inner critic, and it spends a lot of time, mine does, muttering at me from my shoulder and telling me, I've blown it, it's hopeless, give up, all these things. I found that instead of putting this nasty voice over there and hoping it'll go away and I can go back to sleep, I have to develop a dialogue with it. That means I have to wake up, make a cup of tea, because I'm British, and sit down with my inner critic and get to know it. Why? Because our inner critic is like a dragon. It breathes fire at us. It's pretty toxic, but it has a gem underneath its left claw, and that's a diamond. And if we can get close enough to the inner critic by developing a dialogue with it, we can get to know what that diamond is. And in my experience, it has delivered more truth than any best friend. It's amazing. So, fourthly, you're in service. Service is a higher quality of human beings than any other. It's higher than survival. It's higher than learning. It's higher even than making your way in the world. Being 100% present to what's needed. That means a quiet ego, getting away from me, to how can I be of use? Service is why we're here. Fifth and last, when you're troubled, when you're most troubled, that's the time for truth. When you don't know what to do, That's the time to sit quiet, speak it out, talk about the angst and the doubt. Your high self will answer. If we stay quiet and listen, the high self, the soul path, higher intelligence, whatever you call it, is there. It's your inner power to rely on. All of you, all of us, are at the cutting edge of mass collaboration and empowerment. You know the secret. If the mantra of the last century was, what can I get? The mantra of this century has got to be, what can I give? Thank you.